Welcome to episode 20 of Anchored in Education. I'm E. Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. But at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. I want you to imagine with me for a moment. The sport is basketball. There is a manager on the team, a senior by the name of Jason McElwain. Jason has been diagnosed with autism. He has served as a manager for 3 years. His relentless love of the game has led him to miss only one game over the course of his managerial career. Now tonight is senior night, a big deal, and Jason is not in his crisp white shirt and sharp black tie. No, tonight J-Mac, a name given to him by his coach, is suited up, sporting jersey number 52. There is no guarantee he's going to play, but the coach knows he's going to try to get J-Mac into the game. With the game underway, what went down turned into an absolutely magical night. It is an unbelievable story of compassion, but I'm not going to tell you the story. I've invited Coach Jim Johnson, J-Mac's coach and retired teacher, onto Anchored in Education to help us not only relive this wonderful evening, but to give us an inside look to what this moment has done for him and for Jason. Coach, welcome to Anchored in Education.
Thank you.
Hey, so before we get started, I'd like to find out a little bit more about you and how you became anchored in education.
Absolutely. Well, I actually grew up in, my mom and dad were both teachers. My dad actually ended up getting an administration later in his career, and they gave me a great foundation. And so when I got to high school, I got very passionate about basketball and thought I got pretty good and thought I was a lot better than I actually was. I thought I was going to play in the NBA someday, but when I got to college and I got cut from my college team, I realized that that dream wasn't going to come to fruition. But my dad was actually my high school basketball coach, so he and my mom were great models for me, and so I decided that, you know what, I like working with young people. I love education, and I love coaching, so I got a chance to be an educator for over 3 decades, and I was fortunate to be a head coach actually for 30 years. So,
Well,
so they inspired me to and open the door, and fortunately I had a wonderful career in it.
So when you let them know that that was the direction that you wanted to head into education, were they supportive of that?
They were. You know what? With a lot of the changes now, I'm not sure they would be as supportive as they were back then.
Sure.
So, but
What
they were
about
extremely supportive then. Yeah.
what about coaching? Did your coaching style reflect your dad's coaching style, or did you kind of take on your own?
Well, I think I evolved because my dad was very calm, and I got to admit I was not. So early in my career, I was pretty emotional, and I still had my emotions, but I was able to do a much better job later in my career of controlling my emotions and trying to be more like my dad as far as he rarely lost his emotions, although I could never be as good as he was with that part of it.
That is a certain skill to be able to watch the game and control your emotions, I'm sure.
Oh, without a doubt. Yep.
Now,
I got better, but I was not perfect. That's for sure.
sure, but a major part of your anchored in education career, it's revolved around coaching basketball, and I'm sure you're like most coaches. You don't like to hear the numbers, but you were quite good at it too. You racked up 428 wins at the varsity level with only 221 losses, and I don't want to forget to throw in 13 straight Section 5 Final Four appearances and 6 championships. So can you tell us a little bit more? You touched on a little bit on basketball, but can you tell us a little bit more about your life in basketball?
Sure. Yeah. I actually got off to a very humbling experience when I started coaching. My dream was to be a head high school basketball coach, and after just 3 years as an assistant, I became a head coach. I live in a suburb of Rochester, New York, and I got a varsity job and a teaching job at that high school at 25 years old, which is pretty young in my profession.
Wow, yeah.
And certainly, and the program had not been in very good shape, and of course that's why the coach had left. So of course, with all my knowledge and experience of 3 years, I thought, oh, I'm going to turn this program around. And after our first 2 games, we won one, lost one. I thought I was okay. And then with my great coaching wizardry, I led that team to 17 consecutive losses.
Oh, no.
And then, as I kid people, I didn't like what the administration had to say to me after the season, so of course I left that job. But of course, what they told me is you're fired. So
now, do you
that was a pretty humbling experience, but it ended up being extremely rewarding for 2 reasons. After I, of course, sulked for a couple weeks and blamed everybody but myself, I realized there were 2 things that needed to change. Number one, I was pretty arrogant at 25 because I had been a head coach and thought I knew everything. And I realized number one is that I had a lot to learn, and that's when I really started my journey and my personal growth. I spent a lot of time studying coaching and leadership in basketball. And the second thing is it put a burning desire in my belly that actually never went away for the next 32 years in coaching, is that I was going to prove that school wrong for letting me go. And, people find different ways to use things as motivators, and that was one of the things that helped me immensely. It was that any time that I was like, tired and I want to do the extra, like, nope. I went through that once, and so I think that, any time that you go through adversity, and we all do, is what can you learn from it? And is it going to make you better? And I certainly can say that experience helped me become much better as a person and as a coach.
Now, you had over 30 years coaching, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
Correct.
I've talked to a lot of coaches over the years, and many can identify one game in particular that was the highlight of their career. And I'm guessing what you just talked about. Whenever you're 25, that one season of 1-17 was probably not the highlight. But I'm guessing that people don't have to ask you which game it was. It was the game that took place the night of Wednesday, February 15th, 2006. And, of course, I'm talking about the night you gave Jason McElwain the opportunity of a lifetime. Before, though, we get into this game, can you walk us through how you built a relationship with this young man we have come to know as J-Mac?
Yes, certainly. So J-Mac is on the autism spectrum. He is also learning disabled, and he came out for our JV team. I was the varsity coach back in 2003, and he tried out for the team. He was not very good, and he was actually not a very good athlete. He was very little, and he was pretty slow and weak. But my JV coach, I give him a lot of credit. He came into the office after tryouts a couple of days and said, Jason's not a very good player, but man, coach, he's got a big heart. I think we should find a way to keep him in the program. And I said, well, what do you got in mind? And he said, I think I'd like to let him practice with the team and be the team manager. And, by that point in my life, I was really clear on my mission, and that was to be a good role model and to help people make their dreams come true. And I thought, and I said, what? It will probably be good. And it was very good for me, too, because at that point in my life, autism was starting to become more prevalent, but I knew very little about it.
Sure.
And it really helped me understand a lot more about autism, and certainly I observed a lot that year because Jason was not, actually my team manager, although he would sit on the bench for the varsity games as well. And then after that sophomore year, when I really started to gain a lot of closeness to him, was that he just was so bound and determined to make our team. So between his sophomore and junior year, he came to all our off-season workouts, and I was picking him up in his house, and and then he just grew on me. I was like, oh my God, this kid is, and because I'm so passionate about basketball, and he was too, so we would talk basketball all the time, and he knew everything about, he studied, he knew all the starters on all the other teams. I mean, it was just really neat. And so he tried out for the varsity, the team I coached his junior, and he wasn't close to being good enough to make the team, but I asked him to be our team manager, and he was really excited. And he actually developed a mantra that year, because at that point in my career, I had been pretty successful. We had a lot of winning seasons. We had won some division titles, but we had never won the sectional title, which is kind of big in our area.
Uh-huh.
And he told everybody at our team meeting that we're gonna win this year for coach. He called it "Stay Focused." And ironically, at that point in my career, we had gone to the sectional semifinals and the Final Four 5 times.
Uh-huh.
And we got to the semifinal, Jason's junior, and we lost again at the buzzer. And so we were devastated. But Jason, was so bound and determined. So he came again to all our off-season. And I want to share with people, I coached 30 years as a head coach, and I rarely ever had a young man, if they didn't make the team, try out the next year. And Jason did it 3 years old, but not only did he try out, but he came to everything, and he became a big part of it. So when he came out his senior year, I brought him in the office during tryouts. I said, Jason, unfortunately, I've got some good news and some bad news. He says, Coach, give me the bad news first. And I said, unfortunately, you're not quite good enough to make the team. And this time he was really visibly disappointed. I said, but I do have some good news. He goes, what's that, Coach? I said, I'm going to give you a uniform for senior night, which is our final home game, and hopefully get you in the game. And as I kid people, he periodically asked me about that uniform during the season. And of course, I defined periodically as about every other day. So he was pretty excited. And, the interesting thing is his senior year, we were supposed to have a very good team. We had a lot returning from his junior year. Yet we had a lot of internal strife. In fact, I wrote a book about it called Coaching a Miracle, and I'm definitely send you a copy. But so I'll get your address at the end. But,
and we're also putting a link to the book on my website as well.
Okay, great. So thank you. But I write in the book, and it's really too long of a story to get into. But we just had a lot of strife, and the team was really struggling. But Jason was kind of a rock. He didn't completely comprehend what was going on, but he was just so into the team and that kind of thing. So after Christmas, we had a pretty good game in a Christmas tournament after really struggling, and it kind of showed that what we could do. We had a long team meeting, and I listened a lot of what their concerns were, and things got better, and we actually went on a run. And we won 8 of our next 9 games going into our final home game, which is senior night. And that's 2 days before February 15th. I gave Jason his first uniform. And as I kid people, there was a rumor going around school he slept in it for 2 straight nights. I don't know if that was true, but it was a little wrinkled on senior night. But,
sure. So now the night of February 15th, and you've already talked to J-Mac ahead of the game about the possibility of playing. Right. He's got his jersey, number 52, but now word gets out, and the gym that night is just absolutely packed. And the student section, they've made signs that have J-Mac's face and other signs, and there's really, an absolute energy that is palpitating throughout the building. So as a coach, as quarters 1, 2, and 3 go by, did the thought ever occur to you that this might not happen?
No, I really, my whole thought process was I didn't want to give him a cameo. So I wanted to give him enough time. My whole thought process was I was going to want to get him in so he could score a basket. I thought if he could score a basket, that's a memory he'll always cherish. So when I was thinking, and the other thing, because we had so much strife, I had to be very careful to realize that I had to put everybody else in before I could put Jason in, because there was still strife there. And if I ever would have put him in before one of the other guys, that wasn't normally on the team, that would have gone over well at all.
Right.
So I was very cognizant of that, and I got everybody in except for Jason. And so when I put him in with just over 4 minutes to go, the neat thing is, you mentioned that, but Jason and I did not know what had happened is one of our parents made all these pictures, these placards of Jason's face, and put them on paint sticks, and he gave them to student body before the game, and we had no idea he had done that. And so when Jason enters the game, as I kid people, I feel like I'm usually a macho guy. I'm not going to cry at a basketball game, right? Well,
right.
He comes in the game, and they give him a standing ovation, which touched my heart. But what I didn't know, and Jason didn't know, is that it showed all those pictures of his face on the paint sticks, and I just overwhelmed me with emotion. I just sat down, and tears started to roll down my face. It was about as touching as I've ever been in a basketball game. It was just to see how the students greeted him, just warmed my heart immensely. And so now he's in the game, and so the first time he touches the ball, he gets a three-pointer in the corner, and that is on some of the videos. And the crowd stands in anticipation as he lets the shot go, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden it misses by like 6 feet. It's not even close. As I kid people, I know you're not supposed to pray at the public schools, but I was praying, dear God, please help him get one basket. And then, but the really neat thing that it was just a great learning experience. I mentioned in one of my talks, I talk about perseverance. And Jason was the essence of that, because one of the things we taught our players all the time is we called it next play, where, hey, in basketball, the game is so fast. You make a mistake, you got to move on. You can't just sulk. And in fact, we used to call it the double mistake. If you made a mistake, but then you didn't run back on defense, that usually means you're coming out. But if you miss a layup and you hustle back on defense, the coach is going to let that one go.
Okay.
And so that was really important. And Jason was the essence of that. He missed the shot. He missed it badly. He just didn't bother him. He ran back on defense, ready for the next play. And then our next possession, he actually this time hit a much shorter shot, which is not really on any of the public videos, but it's about 10 feet. And I want to add a little drama. It actually hits the backboard. It hits the rim. And it falls off. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. and then our third possession, he actually got a three-pointer this time from the right wing. And this time, magic. It goes in. The place just explodes. And I'm thinking to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a three-pointer. It can't get any better than this, right?
Right.
And then right there, I was like, this is perfect. That he's got a three-pointer, because he would shoot three-pointers all the time in practice with the drills and stuff. And then he makes his next shot, another three. And then he makes another shot, and his foot is actually on the line. And then he just starts making shots, and the place is just going berserk. I mean, it's just bedlam. And in fact, the funny thing is, people ask me, because they kid me, he should have played the whole game, and I said, yeah, he probably should have. But the funny part is, because it's not in any videos, is during that 4 minutes, one of the threes he missed, there was actually a long rebound, and his teammate grabbed it and actually turned and handed it to Jason. It was the only time our opponent, and I want to give kudos to the team, Spencerport, their players and their coach were great that night. They were great sports. But that was the only time they actually let him go, and he dribbled and he hit a wide open layup and he missed it. So he scored 20 points in less than 4 minutes, and yet he missed the easiest shot. But and then the two things I'll never forget, with about a minute to go, by that point he's got 4 or 5 baskets, and I'm sitting on the bench, tears still rolling down my face, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and I look behind me, and it's J-Mac's mother, and she is just bawling her eyes out, and she whispers in my ear, Coach, this is the best gift you could ever give my son. Of course, I cried harder. I was so touched. And then it was like a Hollywood ending. I couldn't make this up. With about 10 seconds to go, Spencerport scores, and our player takes it out of bounds and normally throws to our point guard, but this time he throws to Jason, and the clock is ticking down, and he's just dribbling down, kind of taking his time, and all of a sudden he stops about 2 feet behind the arc, and I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot for that. It's way too far. He lets this rainbow go, and it goes in. And I turn and I see our complete student body running on the floor, our players running on the floor, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm living the movie, Rudy.
Yeah.
And then the last part that was Jason's parents have an interesting dynamic. His dad is 6'6" and his mom is 5'2", and I see this little bitty lady just bobbing and weaving through all the massive people, and she gets to Jason, gives him a big hug, and then our players ended up putting Jason up on their shoulders. He's got the game ball over his head, and at that point I had no idea how many points they had. And our public address announcer comes on and says, the leading scorer for the Trojans, J-Mac, with 20 points. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he played the whole game. He scored 160.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, did his mom know ahead of time that, or I guess his parents, sometime during the season that this was going to happen?
Yeah, because at senior night we bring the parents out and we do an introduction before the game. So yes, they knew that he was going to be in uniform. In fact, that really something I cherish, to see him hug his parents in uniform. Because normally he would have come in a white shirt and black tie.
Sure.
And to see him in uniform embracing his parents was really special for me before the game.
And now, for anyone that's listening, but if by chance they have not seen this video, you've got a great, you've got a couple different links on your website, but one is to an ESPN piece that is put together, and they can see what you're talking about. And as Jason puts it on the video, that he got hot as a pistol, and he sure did. 7 of 13 shots, and like you said, finishing as the high scorer of the game with 20 points. And then the video also shows what you're talking about, the fans storming the floor and Jason being hoisted. What I want to know that they didn't really cover in the video, but I want to know what happened when you got home that night. Did you have any idea of the magnitude of what just happened?
No. I did know that because the one thing I was very proud of, and I definitely have seen a ripple effect of it, where I've seen other really neat stories where coaches are doing nice things for kids with disabilities, is that I was numb. And I got home, and my wife and son had been at the game, and we couldn't believe it. And I had no media there. This was not anything for media attention. But the only thing after the game, my responsibilities, I had to call it in a local paper. They used to do box scores, and they would do a little blurb about it. And when I talked to the sports reporter, she says, Coach, I think I misunderstood. Your team manager's got in and scored 2 points, right? I said, no, he scored 20. And so when I got home, I talked to my wife and son for a little bit. I said, you know what? I think J-Mac's going to get a headline in the newspaper next day. And so I didn't sleep well, and I was so excited. And I woke up the next day, and I opened up our local paper, and we got a headline, but it said Trojans, our school nickname, ties for league title. I'm like, holy mackerel, where's it? And then it mentioned a little bit in the article about Jason, but it didn't make much of a big deal. And so I got to school the next day, and that's where I thought it was going to end, although I did say to people that I didn't do much teaching the next day. We watched that video in my classes for almost the whole day. But what I actually didn't know was Jason's speech pathologist. He had never come to our game, but he had worked with Jason for 4 years. He came to the game, and the next day at school, he actually called one of the local TV stations and said, Coach, or he asked the TV station to borrow the video for us. And they did. They came in and they showed it that night and got a really big response. So the next day we have 4 local TV stations, so 3 of them, the other 3 came in the next day, and then actually one of our sports reporters from one of the local TV stations actually called me on Friday night and said, Coach, this story is amazing. Would you mind if I sent it out nationally? I said, No, if it could make a difference in the country, I think it'd be wonderful. And we were actually going into February break, where in our school system we had a week off, but it was right after our season, so our kids are coming back on our team to practice because we're starting our postseason tournament. And I got up Monday morning to go to practice, and the phone rings in CBS Evening News, and they normally don't call the house. And they said, "Coach, we've heard about the game. We want to come in and do a story." And they did a story on Thursday night, and then it just exploded on Friday, the day before our first sectional game, because we had a bye in the first round. We had ESPN, we had CNN, we had Good Morning America. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
And then ESPN came in and did that little 5-minute documentary that is out on the internet, and then it just after that it just exploded. And then we fortunately went on and won our first sectional title that year, so the cameras kept following us, so that after that game our season was probably another 3 to 3.5 weeks before it ended. And literally, we had cameras there at school every single day. It was just, and during our championship game, we played an arena downtown that seats about 11,000. But normally, for a championship game, we might get 4,000. And we walked in the arena that night, and we had 11,000 people. It was just,
Oh, wow.
The story just absolutely exploded, both locally and then, of course, across the world.
It did, and I think that I read somewhere that CBS. They were the first ones, I think, nationally to come in, and they ran that on their evening news. And you said that you thought it would have a profound impact on the country, and it did, because I read that was one of the first stories where there was such a public demand they ran it again the next night.
They did, yeah, which was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it really is, and I can tell you. I mean, I said in my opening that I still remember hearing about it when it hit nationally, and I've watched that ESPN video a couple times. In fact, I watched it again just preparing for our talk here, and it gives you chills. It really does. I mean, it takes you back, and it sends chills through your body as you see not just Jason get that opportunity of a lifetime, but how everyone else in that gym reacts. It's amazing.
Right.
Now, some would say that the rest, as we know it, is history, but I think that you would agree with me that it's so much more than that, and countless opportunities have really been given to Jason by your act of compassion. I know, I believe it was that same year he met the president, President Bush at the time.
Yes, yep, he did.
Later on in the summer, when the ESPY Awards, he was given an ESPY Award for the biggest sports moment of the year.
Yeah, let me interject one thing.
Yeah, please do.
You're 100% correct, but I wondered, it was kind of interesting. His boyhood idol was Kobe Bryant. And Jason won the greatest sports moment of the year at the ESPYs, and one of the finalists was Kobe, because Kobe had scored 81 points in an NBA game, so he actually beat out his idol, which I thought was pretty neat.
Now, what was his reaction to that?
Oh, I was not invited to go to the ESPYs. I was fortunate I met President Bush, but so I just saw it on TV.
Yeah.
But he told us a lot afterwards. They got a chance to meet Kobe, and Kobe kidded him quite a bit. What do you mean you're beating me out? So,
well, now I would say that it's also, in addition to having an impact on him, it's had a profound impact on you as well. Including you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, giving you the opportunity to learn more about autism. What, over the years, what has been your biggest takeaway from this?
Well, the couple things. I think one is that I think the great lesson from the story is that they're giving people an opportunity, and the famous "don't judge a book by its cover." But at the other side of it, I don't want to deceive people in the sense that I've learned a lot more about autism. I do some work locally here for autism. We've helped raise some money, but autism is a very, very wide spectrum. And I'll give you one quick humbling story. One of my first speaking opportunities after that game that year was I spoke at a school that specialized in working with autistic children in Delaware. And they just wanted me to come in and share the story. And after that, was taken to the airport by one of the parents of one of the students who went to school, and I ended up where my flight got canceled. So I ended up staying with them for the night, and their son was severely autistic. Now, I knew Jason, and Jason, has his challenges,
Right.
but this was way beyond Jason. And it was really a humbling experience, and really opened my eyes to the challenges of families having to have a child on the spectrum, and because it's so wide, people don't think, or people don't realize. I don't think that that it can, there's some that are so severe, they can't, don't speak, really struggle, and then you got others, because I think sometimes, like, you see the movie where they portray an autistic person as a savant, and there are some that are, but I think where people, if I can help educate, is that the spectrum is quite large and is really extreme. And the other thing I really try to help, because when I've helped some of the autism programs in our area, is that where they're really struggling the most is helping their youngsters when they turn 21 and they're out of the school system. And what do they do next, especially for the ones that are severe, that are really struggling, in society. They don't have enough programs for that. So that's something that we're really trying to work to help. I think the education for younger people on the spectrum is really improved greatly, and there's a lot more that's been learned about it, which is encouraging. But that's an area that I know that's, at least in this area, where they're really struggling once their sons and daughters that are on the spectrum, hit the age of 21. What's next?
Sure.
So.
Well, in addition to that you've talked about, you're now retired, and you have been from teaching and coaching since 2015. But you're only retired in that sense, because you're traveling the country, and you're speaking and you're conducting workshops. So can you tell us a little bit about your speaking and the workshops that you do?
Yeah, so I started, and I'm still mainly a keynote speaker. I speak to a lot of different schools and businesses. I spoke at a lot of different conferences, and so my main two keynotes is I developed a keynote called Dreams Really Do Come True. I talk about Jason, and I talk about 6 keys to helping people make their dreams come true, which is to find their passion, discover their mission in life, how to be an effective goal setter, how to persevere, how to seize the day, which I call carpe diem, which I focus on attitude and work ethic, and then how to be an effective team player. And then 4 or 5 years ago, because I've been really passionate about leadership, that helped me immensely in becoming a better coach and teacher, is that I started a second keynote, which sometimes I do as a breakout session, where I'll just focus on the 7 keys to be an effective leader. But sometimes clients want me to share the JMAC story, weaving the 7 keys. So I've done it both. And then I've done a breakout session with leadership. I also, because we spent a lot of time with our players on how to do team and individual goals. So I have a whole goal setting breakout session that I do, that I've done with businesses, I've done with the students, I've done with staff, and then that's another thing that I have a lot of passion with. So the famous quote on goal setting is, you can't hit a target you don't have, and unfortunately too many people don't have targets to hit. So,
and if anybody wants to find out more, CoachJimJohnson.com is your website.
That's correct.
And I'm going to add a link to your website from my website too. So no matter where our listeners choose to go, they can hook up with you and learn more, and including there's contact information for you as well. Before we go, Coach, there is one question I'm sure all of our listeners are hoping is asked today, and I know that it's one that you hear quite often, but do you still keep in touch with Jason McElwain and his family?
Yes, I used to laugh when I travel because people say, "Do you see him anymore?" And I would start laughing. They said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Well, he's like a second son." And actually, the neat part of the story is after that season, he graduated from high school. He actually works at a local grocery store, and although he's doing some work in the school district right now as an aide, which I think is really neat. But Jason, after 2 years away from our program, he would come to the school and I'd see him. He came in one day and he said, "Coach, I just missed the program. Is there any way I can get back involved?" And I said, "Sure." And so my last 9 years in coaching, he was my right-hand person. He was a volunteer assistant in our program. And so I was seeing him during basketball season literally every single day. And then we live in the same town. I see him still quite a bit. We do different things. We still have a few former players that are playing college, so we'll often go to college games and I'll meet him, and we'll get together. I don't see him as often as I once did, but I have contact with him almost every single day. In fact, as I've kidded people, when I be out of town and they ask me, "Do you ever see him anymore?" And I'll show them my phone that I've got like 6 texts and my favorite text is when he texts me like 3 times in a row and I don't respond. Then his 4th text is, "Did you get my text?"
Well, I think it's great that you're able to still have that close relationship, and it adds to the story. It's like the season, the story never ends.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that, and he'll always have a special place in my heart.
Well, and I think that others would agree that the story has a special place in our hearts, and we appreciate you coming on to Anchored in Education today and sharing it with us, Coach.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you bet. You can find Coach Jim Johnson on Twitter. His handle is @CoachJimJohnson. I'm putting a link to him on my website, escottengland.com, so you can follow him today. You'll also find a link to Coach's website as well as a link to his book, A Coach and a Miracle, in this episode's show notes. Now, before I close out today's episode, I want to encourage you to subscribe to Anchored in Education so you can be notified every time a new episode is available. You can do that by searching Anchored in Education in the iTunes and Google Play stores as well as on Spotify. Now, there are not many moments in time that I can remember so vividly, but I remember when the national media outlets picked up this story. I was living in Rochester, Minnesota at the time, working for a television station. Jennifer and I were just months away from welcoming our first child into this world. 950 miles away, outside a different Rochester, Coach Jim Johnson was showing compassion for someone else's child. He looked past diagnoses, labels, disabilities, and instead saw a child's dedication, enthusiasm, and commitment. He saw an opportunity. Coach didn't do this for recognition. He was not aiming for awards or accolades. He wanted to give J-Mac something he has never had before. After watching this in 2006, I had no way of knowing that in a few short years, I'd be back in Illinois letting my own anchor down as a special education aide with students with autism. We need more people like Coach Johnson, people who are not afraid to take a chance to change someone else's life. We sure know it will change yours. And at the end of the day, we will all be anchored in education.